Greetings everybody and welcome back to another livestream recap. As you might know, I'm ImagineerDave, the host of this channel, and I work towards Minecraft's most realistic railway. That being said, today I'd like to take you into the episodes 261 till 270 of the Create SMP series. In these episodes I did some work over at Sheperton, designed and built a paint factory, and then worked some more on the train network. So let's jump straight into what happened, starting off in episode 261. In episode 261 I started the design for some more housing in Sheperton town. The first building of the two I designed was a little bit harder due to it being the connecting piece between the 45-degree part and the 90-degree part. Eventually though, I figured out a way to include it and designed a somewhat smaller but still very Sheperton-ish building next to it. When you design buildings, you also have to make them in survival, of course. And that's exactly what I did in episode 262. When all of this was done, I went back over to Westford Station to work some more on the roads and the retaining walls. And when working here, something else anew sparked my mind. And this new thing would be a paint factory. See, Steam and Rails just had an update. And with that update came something very cool. New locometal types. In order to make locometal from now on, you had to first create paint, for then to use it to craft colored locometals. In episode 263 I started exploring this new mechanic and started working on a design for a working paint factory. Starting off with the paint storage area. In episode 264 we continued on the paint factory. Most of the piping ideas had been figured out and now it was time to look into how the rest of the building was going to look like. I started off by shaping up the big main building, from which I then built a factory floor next to it. The sawtooth shaped roofs on the screen would be this factory floor. This shape of roofing would allow daylight to enter into the workspace without making the building less efficient. At the end of the episode I started setting up the mixing base, which would eventually be the main machinery of this whole factory. Episode 265 was all about the details. I started off this episode by giving the main factory hall some walls and windows. Afterwards, I went on to design the architectural bits for the main building. I wanted this building to have lots of vertical elements to really make it feel tall. This tallness gave me lots of space for interior, however it wouldn't be a great space for the loading docks. For that, I added another little shed at the back. When the shed was done, I went back to the main building in episode 266. I finished up the backside of the main building and the storage building. After this, I went on to build some external storage tanks and the mechanisms to get to it. Episode 267 brought us more work on the paint factory, however this time it was about finishing it up. I dove straight into the design world to get the last bits completed and then started to clear the area over in Westford in the survival world. In episode 268 I got the paint factory built in-game. However, due to replay mod bugging out on me, I sadly don't have the recording anymore. I did still have a shot of me preparing the area for the building however, so that's what's on screen right now. To compensate for the loss of the time lapse, let's just give you a little tour. So, because I couldn't really load the replay mode recordings, what I'm gonna do is just show you this thing in game. See, sadly enough, I wasn't able to open the replay mod files anymore, so yeah, let's just walk in here and see what this actually looks like and what it does. So, in here you actually see our main hull, which is basically used for making the dice, and over here we're gonna mix them up to make even more actual colors. Over here is our storage bay where we can receive our goods. Here is our storage for the dice and for the clay as well. Then, as you can see, all of these lines go down here and they actually split off into this section where I can divert them to the output or divert them back into the storage. And then here is our storage, of course. So I have been using this factory for a bit already, so in some you might actually already see some paint. So up here we can also walk, but this is more of the space for the offices and things like that. Although you do get a nice view over the factory from here. And at the other end of the storage room, there's actually the steam engines to run this whole thing. So it's 2 steam engines level 4. Obviously, above our steam engines, there is the chimney. And from over here, you can actually see the outside a little bit better. Now, let me walk back inside and show you how this works. So, with the new Steamer Rails update, you get more than just the normal actual dice. So what you can, for example, make is olive paint. Now, how do you make that? Well, with green dye and with lime dye. So what I do have in here is actually a system where I can load in the dice and then send them over to our mixer. However, before we make the actual paints, we first have to open up the farms. And we open up the farms inside of here. So what we do is we basically allow the paint from there to go in here. This blue valve basically allows the paint to go in, and the orange valve is actually to go out. So if I open this, I now allow the paint to go into the green storage tank. When I now flip this lever here, it allows the paint to be made. As you can see, it's making the paint over here. It flows down these tubes and goes to the other side of the factory, where we should see that our storage tank is filling up. And it's filling up pretty fast. Now, when we no longer get flow into here, I'm gonna shut off this valve, because that means the making of the paint is done. And indeed, it is. So I'm now just gonna open up the lime one, and I'm gonna allow the lime to go in. Same thing will happen again, and like that, it should be done. So you might now wonder, how do we make the other colors? Well, that's what the mixing setup is for. What that mixing setup allows is for 2 inputs, one from the left and one from the right, to be sent over there, and then to be either sent back over here or to the output pipe, which is this one for now. And well, I need to add more functionality to that later on, of course. This valve over here actually controls or flow from the mixers back into another storage tank. So if this is off, like it is right now, it will actually send the mixed paint straight to the output, but we can also invert that and send it back to one of the tanks. Since I'm not going to be making any loco metal right now, what I'll do is send it back to the tanks, and in here we already have some olive. So if we just open this up, we will receive the olive into here. And what I can now do is open up the valves of the green and the lime to mix it together. I'm going to open that, and I'm going to open that. So you can see down here, all of these actual pipes run back to this spot, and that's where it gets mixed. At the moment, it's set up so that the gold output goes over to the blue one, and we see down here that, well, this is filled with green, and that green gets sent to the olive tank. Now, let's say this one gets full. I can just shut that off right now so it will not go in there anymore. And then you might wonder, what do we do with the rest that's inside of here? Well, I'm gonna show you real fast. We first stop our inputs. That way we make sure that no more is actually entering the mixers. We still have stuff in here. But now we can actually open one of these valves, which is the paint mix spill line. So if I open that, what happens is actually this gets thrown out into the world over there. That basically makes it so that that one will run until it's empty, and that way we can start a next cycle again. All empty and ready for the next cycle. So that's a little quick explanation of how the paint factory works. So how did you enjoy that little tour through the factory? Cool, right? Well, you know what's even cooler? trains of course. If we look back at episode 267, I also changed the schedule of the goods train to run past Cozy and get near the paint factory. Continuing on in episode 269, we went back into train stuff. This time doing work over at Barrington. See, over here, Koen joined for a bit and expanded the station canopies. This allows for more platforms and therefore trains to come in. However, before this was all possible, the track would need some real work. In this episode and in episode 270, I redid the station entry and exit, made the platforms all bidirectional, and got started with preparations for the new computercraft signaling system. This system would eventually add more realistic route information to our signals, but before we could set that up, I had to install all of the hardware. And that was it for this episode. We now have a beautiful paint factory to supply us with colored loco metal into the future. Besides this, Westford has a new filled-in plot of land, which is nice on its own, of course. As always, I want to thank you so much for following along, as it really helps me to stay motivated and make more plans. If you want to check out these live streams, be sure to join my Discord down below to get notified when I'm live, or follow me here on YouTube to get community notifications. If you are looking for schematics, some can be found over at my Discord and others at my Patreon page. Again, I'd like to thank you for watching. This is ImagineerDave, signing off, so bye bye!